What's going on, guys? Pat here, and in this video it is finally time to prep the car and take it to its first autocross. So in the last video, which was sort of the last big episode in the build series, you saw that we finally got the car on the road, started turning its first miles, and since then nothing's really changing. See, I put the back seat back in and the rear door cards, things like that. Dashes are back in place with the trim around them. Still don't have the trim piece over on that side of the dash back in. And the issue with that was we had made a new piece to allow for the remote brake bias adjuster from Tilton, which is nice because I can adjust the brake bias just by hand. I don't have to, go under the dash or anything, and I can adjust it in real time as long as I'm not on the brakes. So we had cut a new dash piece and drilled the dash to put that piece in, but the issue we're running into is the adjuster doesn't really have room. I don't know how well this is going to pick it up on the end of the actual rod. The adjuster threads onto the end of the balance bar rod, and there's not enough room to allow for free range of motion. When you're actually hitting the brakes, it'll actually try and bend the cable that goes to it. So Tilton makes a 90-degree adjuster that is made for that purpose, that you thread on, and it reorientates the cable 90 degrees off to allow for clearance on the gas and the clutch pedal. But I'm not gonna be able to get that in time for the autocross, so I'm just gonna have to go out once the 315 squared setup's back on, set the brake balance, just to get started, and then set the jam nut, and then if I have to adjust it at the event, then I'll adjust it by hand in between runs. So a little unfortunate, but it's really not the end of the world. Honestly, I probably wasn't going to mess with the balance adjuster all that much to begin with, but sucks that we're just going to have to go back and re-add it back in after this event. But as far as, big work, there's really nothing left to do, just log miles on the car, keep checking for issues. Yeah, that's really going to be it. So I think I have about 100 miles on the car so far. I need 250 for the clutch minimum before we go out to Lime Rock. I'd like to get the 500 on the trans, but I don't think that's really critical. I'm still going to shoot for that. But yeah, I'm going to throw the driver's seat back in here and keep logging some miles, and I'll update you guys if anything interesting happens. Alright, so here we are, day before the event. It's currently Friday. Just doing a final nut and bolt check on the car, checking for leaks, addressing a few rattles, making sure all my adjustments are good, just seeing if there's any issues that stick out. Have about 200 miles on the car, so I've had a chance to start getting used to it and start addressing the small issues that come up. Mostly just been squeaks and rattles, which isn't the end of the world. Since the last clip, the only adjustment I made to the car was adjusting the clutch pedal a little bit. I noticed the clutch was ever so slightly still engaged when the pedal was pushed all the way down, so gave it a little more throw. Seemed to address the issue. So aside from that, it's been good, just letting the EFI learn, getting used to driving the stick. Letting the car kind of settle in. Had the 315s back on it just to get used to driving with that setup. Obviously I wanted to take some pictures, so I wanted the new wheels and tires on there. And so while I was doing this nut and bolt check, I was checking over the brake system because we just redone it, so I want to see if there's any leaks, any issues like that. And I noticed that the plastic sheathing on this cable was frayed. So I jacked the car up, took the wheel off, and upon further inspection, something had eaten through the plastic sheathing, the stainless braided sheathing, and it's down to the Teflon hose now. And so what I think happened when I looked into it a little more was that the wheel weights were contacting the hose. Probably when the car was turning left, the wheel would come in and hit it. It really just has to do with the hose orientation. See if I can try and get it on this side. This hose is absolutely fine with no issues when it's fully turned lock to lock. No idea if that's even going to pick up anything. It's kind of dark in there. But just was my own fault for not checking the orientation on it. Obviously it was fine with the way narrower wheels and tires. But with these sitting, this inside edge further inward compared to these, they were hitting. Luckily it's not the end of the world though. It's not preventing me from going to the event because although I don't have any spares for that, I do have spare Willwood flex lines, but they're shorter. The local hydraulic shop that I had make the custom lines that go up here off the master cylinders should be able to make this hose pretty easily. It's very simple. I think it's like 14-inch, and then it's like 3 AN on both ends, or 4 AN. So they should be able to make that hose pretty easily. Technically this hose isn't punctured, but I don't really feel safe running that, knowing that you know, the sheathing has been compromised, and also I don't know how much of the thickness of the hose itself has been eaten away. Obviously it's not ruptured, I never leaked or lost brakes, but it did start eating its way into the Teflon hose. I don't know how well that'll pick it up. So you know, if this is really the only big teething issue I face, it's really not the end of the world. I mean, it sucks because it's something stupid. It was my own fault. I should have checked the orientation of the hose, and then that wouldn't have been an issue. But luckily I caught it before the event, and so I'm gonna go run to hydraulic shop, have the new hose made, and I'll check in with you guys once we're getting this thing back together. All right, so just got back from having that new brake line made. Got the car up in the air here to do the final nut and bolt check. Some people are probably wondering what a nut and bolt check is, so I'll quickly go over that and kind of why you do that before an event. Really, in its simplest form, a nut and bolt check is just checking all of the key nuts and bolts, really on suspension mounting points, brakes, engine transmission mounts, things like that. You can take a step further and do like seat bolts, lap belt bolts, because in my case, like the shoulder harnesses mount to the cage however, there's no nut and bolts to check there. We're kind of just checking over all the key components, make sure everything's bolted together properly. Typically it's kind of just done over the course of the season, checking it regularly to make sure nothing comes loose, nothing critical especially. We're going to be doing this just because it's fresh build, so I only have a few miles on it, so there's not a high chance that anything came apart, but just making sure that everything's torqued spec. I didn't miss anything when I was putting it together. So yeah, that's what we're doing here. Looking at the new brake hose, I got this replaced and up and then there, reorientated properly to be out of the way of the wheel. I'll check lock to lock just to verify that, but it's set up the same as the one on the other side that doesn't have any issues. So yeah, as far as the nuts and bolts, I'm going to check on this nut and bolt check, do all the control arms, probably the caliper nuts that hold the calipers on, all the spindle bolts, steering arm bolts, steering bolts in general. I'm gonna go ahead and put the red Loctite on the steering shaft bolts. Originally, I was leaving those without red Loctite because I was gonna pull it back off and paint it, but at this point, the event's tomorrow, so I'm just gonna throw the red Loctite on, and then I'll fight with that when I take that back off to repaint that. But yeah, so that's the main bolts I'm gonna be focusing on. Obviously, if I come up with more along the way, I'll check more, but nothing too crazy. You know, it's good to have that peace of mind, make sure everything's on there tight and properly installed, and then I'm not gonna worry about you know, having anything go wrong unexpectedly like that. And you know, even today doing the nut and bolt check, I caught that brake line that I wouldn't have caught had I not checked the car over. So yeah, so slowly just going over everything. It's really the last big thing to do before the car's ready to go. Apparently we're gonna have a truck and trailer tomorrow. My dad's gonna borrow a trailer from a family friend. We'd ordered an enclosed trailer from Hallmark, but it's not in yet. I don't know if it's a material shortage or what it is. So I anticipated driving the car to and from the event, which I still plan to do. I think the truck and trailer is more of an insurance in case anything goes wrong. Lime Rock's about an hour and a half from where we live, so if something does go wrong, that's an expensive tow or a very long flat tow home. So it's raining here, so I'm about 50 miles short of where I need to be to fully break in the clutch. And you need about 250 miles. I'm at 200. So if it clears up this afternoon, I'm gonna go take it out and try and log those last 50 miles. And then we'll just trailer the car to Lime Rock in the morning. But if it stays crappy out here today, coincidentally, Lime Rock is about 48 miles or so from my house, which is about the 50 I need. So I'll just drive it there in the morning to finish the braking miles on the clutch if needed. So I'm gonna take care of this nut and bolt check, and if I find anything interesting, I'll fill you guys in. But other than that, next time you see the car, it'll probably be back on the ground. We'll be putting the vinyl decals on it of all the brands and companies. So yeah, I'm gonna start taking care of this, and then I'll check with you guys in a bit. So I'm under the car here doing the nut and bolt check on the front. Just wrapped up. I figure I kind of show you guys what I'm checking, looking at, and going over. Kind of starting out at the end here, looking at the steering knuckle bolts, make sure those are good. Doing a visual inspection on all the cotter pins for ball joint nuts and any nut really that has the cotter pin on it. Make sure it's good. As long as the cotter pins are good shape, then nut hasn't moved. Over here, have a nylon lock nut for the tie rod end, the stud that goes through it. Make sure this is all tight. Make sure the tie rod itself is tight with jam nuts. Control arm mounts, I just greased these. Otherwise, I would be greasing these and checking them, make sure they're good. The shear mount bolt for the coilover is good, as well as the other bolts that control the arm. The sway bar end link bolts, sway bar mount bolts, the main bolt that ties the pitman arm onto the steering box. And same thing over here on this side. So just kind of checking over everything, make sure it's all tight. I mean, it is, which isn't really a surprise since this thing literally got bolted together like less than a month ago. But it's still good to have the due diligence and check everything. So you have a grounding stud here on the engine block. Make sure all the stud nuts are tight for the starter wire that runs down the oil pan. Back to the starter over here. Checking little stuff like the oil pan bolt. So I just changed the oil a few days ago. Make sure that's not leaking. The temperature bung here. Checking the dipstick tube over here. Make sure that's not leaking. There's a little bit of oil collection on the bottom of the oil filter, which I think is just from when I changed the oil and oil was running down, but I'm going to keep an eye on that. Make sure there's not an active oil leak anywhere. Also doing a visual inspection for any leaks here at the bottom of the engine, since a lot of the times it like to run down. Everything looks good, no coolant, no oil, no anything. You can check down here at the bottom of the steering box for leaks and whatnot. Same thing, looks good. It's cool to see the car from the bottom side here. Notice this is still twilight blue. I wanted to leave this. Sometimes when we change the engine setups, I like to keep a little piece of the old setup to kind of throw back to it. So this is still from when we painted the engine twilight blue. It's going to get swapped out to an ATI balancer anyways. This one still reads well, but it's only a matter of time, especially now it's going to be on track under high RPM before it spins and slips. So not going to risk it too much longer, but going up to the top side here is what I'm going to check next. Do the same thing, just check the top of the coilover bolts. These bolts here that go through the rod ends for the control arm mounting bolts. And that really should be most everything. Not going too crazy, like I said, I'm mostly just focusing on the key structural stuff. But, you know, I'm going to keep an eye out for anything else that may come up over the backside here. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be the control arm bolts front and rear, the lower mount and the upper mount, as well as sway bar bolts. Check the caliper bolts here, shock bolts, stuff like that. And yeah, that's really going to be everything. There's a few small things that I wanted to get done before the event, which I didn't. One of which was switching away from this stock style sway bar to a chassis mounted sway bar. I looked at a few companies. I was kind of down to ABC Performance and Spone Performance, I think were the two that I was looking at. Because Gorham Performance Engineering doesn't make any sway bars yet, so not really an option, unfortunately. But I had a few questions and I reached out and I didn't hear back from ABC Performance. Otherwise I would have gone ahead and ordered one. But it's not the end of the world. Those just have a tendency to bind, so you're not going to get maximum grip. It's not like it won't corner, but it's not as good as a chassis mount bar. It's not like I'm going to swap sway bars and gain seconds per lap, but you know, you put definitely a few tenths there just from controlling the back end. But yeah, so this is where I'm at. Slowly checking over everything. So slowly getting there, but you know, it's kind of monotonous and boring, but definitely necessary as a sort of safety check. Just have your due diligence. So I know this thing is going to be ready when we take it out tomorrow. All right, so here we are, morning of the event, currently loading the car up. Have my backpack for just miscellaneous chargers and stuff in it. GoPro mounts, I have one that's gonna go up on top of the roll bar up there and kind of give a wide angle view of me driving it outside the car. I also have my helmet mount, which is kind of more up close. Bringing my little remote battery. It's actually a jump pack, but it doubles as a remote battery to charge things like my mirrorless camera, my phone, the GoPro, things like that. Packing up our tools. My dad's picking up the enclosed trailer right now. It's currently like 6:15 in the morning. We're probably gonna head out about 6:45 to get there for the 8:30 drivers meeting. So as far as tools I'm bringing, it's gonna be bringing my little mechanic set, which has like a bunch of wrenches in it, Allen keys, 6 and 12 point shallow and deep sockets for both metric and SAE. Also a little screwdriver set. Have a torque wrench up here. I already cold set the pressures to 30 psi front and rears. One of my friends is bringing a good digital tire gauge. So we will use that to adjust pressures throughout the day. A little tired this morning. It was a long night doing all the vinyls and stuff. One of my good friends. You can see him here. I'm happy with how it turned out. So a little bit of a brand representation for all the big brands that I run a lot. Pretty subtle with the matte black. I mean, there's massive door logo. That one's not going to stay. We just kind of threw a big one on for this event, and it'll go to one that's more similarly sized to the rest. So we have Gorham Performance Engineering up there. Down here we have Willwood. Holley EFI, Durali, and Tilton, all brands that have been key in getting this car where it is. The one logo I wanted to have on there but don't is UMI, just because the vinyl got messed up. So I have to reprint some new ones of those. But ultimately we'll probably put the UMI up here on the front of the door and then do a smaller Gorman Performance Engineering down on the corner panel. And also have Pro Touring Oldsmobiles repping the Facebook group. So getting this thing loaded up. I am probably going to drive it this morning. Just let the EFI learn some more. It's a little cloudy out here today, but it's not raining or anything. It's not supposed to rain at all today. It's just kind of supposed to be overcast. So I'm going to finish loading up, and then unless something remarkable happens, the next clip should be this thing pulling into Lime Rock. So here we are, a few days after the event. Got the car back up in the air on the stands, just kind of looking over everything, see if anything came apart, any failures, anything rattled out of position, any leaks, anything like that. Car looks good overall. I'm really happy with how the event went, how it performed for its first shakedown. It was cool, kind of like an open hot lapping session, not really like a traditional autocross. Sucks that the track was a little crowded at times, so I had to abandon a lot of hot laps just to give space to the car in front so I could build up a gap and just to catch back up. But that's how it goes at events like that. We knew it wasn't gonna be, you know, one at a time autocross, but weren't really concerned with outright lap times, just kind of getting a feel for the car, getting comfortable with it, start working on setup, start getting some data about the car. And you know, we were successful in that regard. Really the only big issue that was exposed was it has severe rear wheel hop under heavy braking. Even though I have the bias pretty forward right now, it's probably like 60%, 65% front bias. We're still really shaking the back end of the car. It could still be not enough bias to the front, which I highly doubt. Could have been tire pressures, could be shock rebound settings. These are just UMI street performance shocks that don't adjust in compression or rebound. So might have to throw a set of adjustable shocks on there, which is probably long overdue at this point. Or it could be control arm geometry, so I'd have to take a look at that with the car back on the ground, but probably diagnose that in a future video. But overall, car handled really well. Was much more neutral than I thought it would be. I thought this thing was going to be a handful to drive. Used to driving our E92 M3 in autocrosses, and at that track, which is a very confidence-inspired car, very neutral, and this was actually pretty similar. It felt very tossable and nimble for its size and weight. Was very pleased with it. Cornered honestly flatter than the M3 does. Not that the M3 has a bunch of mods on it, but you know, it's still a well-hendering car from the factory. But yeah, this car was you know, much better than how I thought it was going to do, both from a reliability standpoint and also performance standpoint. It's good. You know, it was pretty easy to start getting accustomed to. You know, obviously I still have many more events before I'm going to be, you know, very comfortable with the car and starting to get to what it can actually do. But yeah, I actually put together a video. I don't know if I'll put it in this video or do a separate video of my fastest time on that track with the M3, as well as my fastest lap from the shakedown with this. And I think you'd be surprised at the results. It was only a half-second difference. M3 was half-second faster. And this car was actually losing most of its time under braking, just because of that big brake hop issue. I couldn't get on the brakes nearly as hard as I could have. I was probably going like 70% on the brakes just so I wouldn't induce the wheel hop. But this thing was pretty much the same on the straights, maybe a little faster. This had similar cornering speeds, pulled similar Gs. This was between like 1 and 1.2. I don't know how accurate that data is, but regardless, it was similar to what the M3 was pulling and keeping up. And yeah, so that's really what was losing its time, was just under the big braking zone, so big on the autocross track. But you know, it's cool to see that this can keep pace with a modern sports car. Now I have room for improvement driving both cars. You know, I could argue I probably could go faster in this if I had the same number of events under my belt that I did in the M3 at the time. But yeah, it's just a cool benchmark just to see it's kind of in the ballpark of that car.
Yeah. Modulate throttle.
So yeah, it's overall a great first outing. The first proper autocross where it's going to be more traditional cones in a parking lot with actual classes and, you know, normal competition. Will be in probably 2 or 3 weeks. I'm hoping we can get that brake hop issue sorted before then, kind of need to in order to be competitive, because we're going to be in an actual CAM-T class running against, you know, proper, you know, cars that they should be running against, not just kind of an open track day where times aren't recorded. But yeah, overall it was a success, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. So that's really going to do it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you liked it, feel free to leave a like. Subscribe if you want to see more. If you have any questions or comments or input in general, feel free to leave a comment. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next one.